Hi guys, so today we're going to be learning about everything chapter 3. So you're going to need some paper, some pens to take notes, and if you're like me, you're probably going to want some coffee as well. So to start out with an overview of what chapter 3 is about, it's basically about how the colonial era put into place many cultural, legal, social welfare, and political traditions that are still relevant today. So in the 17th and 18th centuries, a group of settlers traveled across the sea and came to America. They wanted to break away from religious control that was in Europe and make their own new religious groups here in America. They also wanted to improve their economic status because Europe had limited opportunities. It was a very diverse group that was on a wide spectrum of beliefs, so they created a political culture that was very different from previous nations. It was also interesting that travelers had somewhat of a stern attitude to helping others in need because they had suffered so much by themselves before coming to America. So the medieval society was organized into a hierarchy. The only people who could own land were the monarchs and the noblemen. The Catholic Church paid taxes to monarchs and helped them gain recruits for the army. And serfs were at the very bottom here. They worked the land for the noblemen monarchs, and church paid taxes to them, give them a share of the land. The citizens also paid taxes to the church in exchange for assistance. Medieval society was the opposite of capitalistic, and they strongly believed in conformity to tradition. People were normally born into a position. So once they were in one position, it was very rare that they would change and move up in society. Also, the Catholic Church was the only church. People would try to establish their own religions, and they could be put to death for that. The new settlers brought many new religions and ideas to the New World, and they were inspired by many of the people who rebelled. So the next big event that occurred was the American Revolution. It's important to talk about the factors that led up to this. So King George was worried about the cost to protect colonies from Native Americans. So there was new taxes on a set of goods, which made the colonial leaders very angry. War broke out when King George did not honor the American assistance on independence. So after the Revolution, an era of limited government arose. Americans ran into a problem when they saw that 13 different colonies would be too difficult to manage as opposed to one. The framers were very concerned with dangers of an oppressive central government. So then two leaders, Hamilton and Jefferson, got into a battle because Hamilton wanted a strong central government and Jefferson wanted a limited government. Eventually, Jefferson won during his term and implemented limited government and reduced expenditures as well as reduced taxes. After the American Revolution, Americans did not believe that poverty would become widespread in their society. However, they still wanted measures in place to help people in need. These donors came from government or private donors, and the church was also a good source of charity. Women who had been divorced or orphans or women with children were also eligible for assistance. However, there were many groups who were oppressed against. African Americans were seen to be outside of the social combat, so they were not eligible for benefits. Women were oppressed against because the man was seen to be in control of the household, and women were seen to be less strong than men physically, mentally, and intellectually. Native Americans were oppressed against because there was conflict over land between Native Americans and settlers, and Native Americans also brought diseases such as smallpox. White poor people were also seen to be oppressed against because people felt as if they couldn't hold their weight and weren't trying to build their life up and be productive in society. So the big question is, how is everything we learned about from the colonial period in chapter 3 relevant to welfare today? So although the term welfare state wouldn't be coined until the 20th century, pieces of the welfare we know now created and were existing already during the colonial period. Cultural factors include an emphasis on individualism and limited government. And also, social welfare in that time focused on a mixture of indoor and outdoor relief programs. So the terms liberal and conservative weren't actually used yet until much later on, but we can see that these two sides of the spectrum arose during the colonial period, and they still had conflict, and this shaped the political culture in America today. We also see how oppression and racism of different minority groups began in the colonial period, and they continued to be relevant in American culture today. In regards to economics, we also see the colonial period started the process of owning property as well as renting and buying and selling it. So thank you guys for watching. This chapter was a little in-depth and had a ton of information, but it's actually really cool to see how the welfare state we have today actually arose from the colonial period and all the factors that contributed to it.